Alright, so welcome back to another playthrough of Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, difficult. We're going to be doing chapter 4, and the main goal for this chapter is, now that we've been Seth, we're going to be allocating as much EXP as possible and having a big wide swath of units see as much combat as we can. Or at least that's what I'm going to try to do. We're going to see what actually happens. First order of business is taking out this Revenant at the bottom. And just overall just feeling out what everybody can do so far versus these first couple enemies. Alright, the topic of discussion for this episode is going to be the dominant strategy, and how the dominant strategy can be both a positive and negative ideology to use when you play games, and in this game specifically. First, I want to go over a comment that I've been getting a lot of comments pretty much every time I post these to Reddit, and I've seen quite a few people give some pretty thoughtful rebuttals to what I have to say. And this comes from a user named OldSpice16. I'm not going to read the whole comment, just this particular section that I would like to respond to via video. The other parts I'll probably just write up like I have been. And his statement goes: the issue with the tutorials in games like this one, or in games that have one, are that while they explain basic concepts, they rarely if ever provide the player with a sense of importance to them. You can watch Etika or Abdallah play the games, and you'll rarely ever see them make use of very basic concepts outside of their normal, lack of a better term, purpose, because the game has given them no reason to think they should explore the potential of set mechanics, and they certainly can get by without doing so. Even the newer games, which have significantly more detailed explanations of their mechanics, still often go underutilized. The games simply do not do an adequate enough job of putting the player into situations where they really need to make use of them in order to understand how useful they are, in my opinion. I remember watching a good amount of Fate's gameplay from a variety of channels when the games initially were released, and rarely did I ever see someone intentionally making use of the attack stance feature despite it being very easily explained in the tutorial chapters, while most people use guard stance, which was also explained simply because, unlike the attack stance feature, which has more depth to its mechanics, such as providing increased hit rates from having allies next to your characters when they aren't paired up, the guard stance feature is much more straightforward for a less experienced player to grasp what makes it useful. Apologies for getting into this small tangent about a different game from the GBA titles entirely, but it seemed to be the easiest way I could think of to hopefully illustrate what I was trying to say. Alright, and I took a small pause from the gameplay. I think I had to check a message at the time of the recording, I want to address the issue I have with using Let's Players as a benchmark for people just playing the game and not using resources or playing the game well at all. A lot of Let's Players like to focus on the personality aspect of their channel or content. So they're not specifically there to explore the game in general, they're just there to have the game as a backdrop and experience it with their audience. It's not specifically for them to get better or to have more sophisticated ways of approaching or tackling the game. There are people that are well versed at doing both, that are big names, such as, I'll bring up Markiplier as an example. I watched him do an Alien Isolation playthrough a couple of years ago, and he, while also being entertaining, was able to not be a complete moron when he played the game and made some pretty intelligent decisions as he was playing. So it is not wholly impossible for someone to actually do a good job both learning how to play the game and using different strategies, as well as being a general Let's Player and entertaining your audience. The second thing I would like to comment on is the fact that the mechanics that the game gives you are often not... Oh, Arthur's in trouble. The mechanics of the game are often not... Ooh, that crit though. Are often not well touted throughout the game, as in the game doesn't really challenge you to use these very, very not so well thought out, or no, I shouldn't say well thought out. The tutorials aren't thick and deep with the explanations enough, but also without being like overly wall of texty, where you don't want to read it all, and it's not presented. The presentation, that's the word I'm looking for. The presentation of the tutorial isn't entertaining enough for people to really engage with, and it's also not verbose enough for it to really get through its, to really get the point across of what it's trying to explain to the players. And then from there, the game itself, after the tutorial is over, doesn't give you situations either immediately or in the near future or even anywhere in the game, because you said that they could get by the game completely without ever having to use that mechanic at all. It doesn't give you a chance to really explore what that mechanic can do. And I would say that that's a catch-22, because a game could give you the ability to have no tutorial at all, or a little tutorial, or too much tutorial, and you would have the same issue of people not using things because the game itself doesn't have the funneling for you to be able to have the situation where it's pretty obvious that you need to use this certain mechanic. I would say that I'm leaning more towards the negative side of what a dominant strategy would be in that situation, which would be to continue using what was already working for you, rather than taking a chance of using another strategy that may work out, but you have no stigma leading you to push you over the edge. And sometimes games do this in a very bad way. I'll use Final Fantasy Tactics as an example. You can get soft-locked out of the game at one point if your character, main character Ramza, isn't at a strong enough point in his development of you just making him as a character, I guess, being adept at being a fighter. You have this confrontation with a character named Whiteraf, and it's basically a 1v1 fight where you have to beat him. It's a boss fight where you have to fight one enemy without the use of your party mates. So if Ramza himself isn't strong enough to get through that fight, you're soft-locked. You can't it auto-saves, so you can't go back out unless you have another save file that you made for whatever reason before the fight, and you can't go back to the overworld. Every time you start up the game, you just have to start at that fight. So you're soft-locked in. If Ramza can't do it on his own strength as a single unit, then you're kind of up a creek, and you basically have to restart the entire game up to that point. And so I would see that as a negative, that a lot of people, even in this game, can get funneled into using a character like Seth. Seth opens this window where, yes, he is an extremely powerful character capable of many, many things, but the game does not give you all the tools you would need to know, either as a new player or not so experienced, but you still kind of understand because you've played through the game maybe once, maybe twice. And you can easily fall into the trap where you use Seth so much and you put him into so much combat early on that none of your other units grow, and then you finally get to a chapter where it's kind of mandatory that you have like a well-balanced party, because you're not using the strats where you can solo the game as just Seth by himself, because that's completely impractical to expect for a person who hasn't thoroughly studied the game and seen the playthroughs and has the experience to do so. They just simply won't be able to do it, and they'll be soft locked out of the game, and they'll have to restart and actually use him less, or in most cases, just completely bench him, because he's just taking up too much of not just the EXP, but just the gameplay in general. Like, it's just too much of him playing the game by himself, and not enough of the player finding out that these other characters have their own strengths and weaknesses, and how using other characters with each other can interplay in very interesting ways that have this dynamic range that is almost incalculable, because there's so many combinations, so many different classes, so many different units, so many different possibilities where their growth rates are going to send their stats, so many ways you can increase those stats with certain items. There's just an infinite swath of things that you can do. So to only funnel yourself into that dominant strategy of just using Seth and using extremely powerful pre-promos later on and things like that kind of rob the game of its ability to teach people if you only play so in that manner without exploring or having different experiences doing other things. Well, Vanessa, thank you for that crit. It's a pretty good crit. That's a terrible level of time. But thank you for the crit. Thank you for the dodge, Nimi. And then after that, what else do I want to comment on in this comment? I think I basically summed that up, what I meant, or my response to that particular section of his comment. After that, I guess we can just talk about how I feel about dominant strategy in general. The dominant strategy is a concept where... Actually, I don't think I need to redefine it. Let's just say that we have a dominant strategy in this game where it is most optimal in any way you play the game to always use a certain unit to do a certain thing, such as it's always optimal to have Colm be on a chapter, be in the party comp, because he has access to the lockpick. Therefore, you don't need to buy a bunch of keys, wasting money, and you also don't need to worry about ferrying the items to like Merlinius and FE7. You can just send them back to the supply via just the command. So that's a dominant strategy, to always bring him on maps with treasure chests. What that would funnel you into doing, while that's not necessarily a bad thing, you would miss out on the opportunity to learn that there are certain ways you can manage getting a bunch of chest keys from other units. The green drops that you get from enemies. You can manage coupling that with the ability to buy chest keys from shops. Actually, I don't know if you can do that. Let me use a different example. Because my idea was that you could use the ability to buy keys and give them to different units that you wouldn't normally use to go get treasure chests, like your flyers or your wyvern. Well, I guess that counts too. All of your flyers and all of your mounted units just run up and get the treasure chests and send them back, rather than use that slot for Colm if you're not really using a thief like that, or you're not privy to leveling your thief or utilizing them for menial tasks. If you just hate thieves, or you didn't want to use a thief, or maybe your playthrough standard didn't really allow you to use thieves in that way. So now you have this different dynamic where you don't actually need to use that as a dominant strategy because you've now opened up this wide array of possibilities that wasn't privy to you before because you kept using that one strategy over and over again, and you kind of got blindsided by the fact that the game offers so much more to you if you were to like explore those different avenues. And a lot of this comes from personal experience, as well as the personal experience from other players that interplay when you communicate with them, via online or in person or however it is you talk to people. And these guys are doing pretty well for themselves. It was kind of shaky at first, put Arthur in a kind of a bad spot, but see, he made it through. It's nice. And now we have Loot. I don't know if I'm going to use her. I definitely do not use her in the next map, but I don't know if I'm going to use her just in this playthrough in general. I might, but I'm also looking to use Ewan, and he's more than enough sage for... Actually, no, I'm not going to make him a sage. I'm going to make Arthur a sage. So, I don't know what I'm going to do. I could use Loot. Having 3 mages, though? Should I do that? Would be Arthur, Loot, Ewan. Natasha's gonna be my healer. And... yeah, I guess that's fine. Yeah, I'll use Loot. Why not? I'll use her later on. Going back to what I was talking about before, I guess a positive, I should mention some positives for using dominant strategy. The dominant strategy obviously has the one of its strong points is sharpening your fangs when you're trying to learn a specific method of play. And oh, this was a weird decision. Why did I choose to do this with some sword? He gets hit. He's at 6 HP. Actually, I don't know. I'm gonna get out of this. I know he doesn't die because I can see into the future, but that was a weird decision. Okay, so he can't do anything. I think I bank on the fact that that Revenant can't actually kill Franz, but let's see. Yeah, I think I lucked out because I didn't actually check his stats, but let's see. Yeah, Gilliam can't do anything to save you because he doesn't have Javelin. But Vanessa's there, and she does have a Javelin. Oh! Okay, never mind. She was there. Never mind, I thought she was still in that corner way over there. So that worked out. She didn't level though. That's fine. She's 1 point away. The dominant strategy has this thing of letting people find out what is the most optimal choice for very specific playstyles and funneling them in a positive way so that everybody knows what like the parameters are at all times, so there's no confusion about what you should do going forwards. And if everybody's using this to... why did I use that vulnerary? It's completely... I think I was scared of Arthur's lack of defense and his questionable ability to dodge, even though he has... oh my god. Speak of the devil. Arthur, why do you do this? Everybody's on board with the fact that the dominant strategy should be the standard that everybody's working towards. So there's no real reason to deviate from that. If you're all heading towards the same goal, using that strategy as a baseline is not something you shouldn't do. It would actually put you at a disadvantage to not do it. And why did I stand there? I guess I was mad because he didn't dodge the first time, and I'm like, you're gonna dodge this time. Please. Oh, the crit at 7 HP. I love it when he does that. I don't love it when he does that. And that wraps up that chapter. I could have used some defense, could have used some speed, could have used anything, Arthur. That worked out. Am I gonna keep going for the next chapter? Nah, I'm gonna stop it here.